Let's blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. It's time for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I'm your host, Jason Sircone. I am damn glad to be back on the microphone with you tonight, as we are every Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. If you're not following, if you're not subscribed, please go take care of that immediately. If you're seeing this message, then I have to believe that you are tuned in on one of your favorite networks. Tonight, we're going to dive into some fun podcasting talk, focusing on the marketing side with the quintessential extraordinaire on this subject. So without further ado, I want to bring Miss Anna Xavier to the stage. Anna, what is happening?
Hello, thank you for having me. So excited to be talking about this. It's actually today's the second interview that I'm doing on this topic. So I'm like, let's
So
go.
you're already primed and ready to do this. So we don't have to do
Yes,
any type of warm up. The voice is flexed. It's time to rock and roll.
let's do it. Honestly, your intro got me so pumped up. I am so ready. So
I'm
this is a
telling you,
great Sonic experience, by the way.
the Bomb Squad's probably getting tired of listening to this, but I'll say it to you because I've been saying the compliments that have been rolling in every week from the guests. And that's really the idea, is to really get the excitement going, get the energy up for us, for the viewers, for listeners when they check out the replay. I'm submitting this. I'm going to submit the intro to these awards and see if they'll award something for a good podcast intro, because it seems to
I
be doing the
think
trick.
I agree. I agree. Honestly, like let's try it up and see. Because again, a year from now, you'll be like, "Hey, yes, got nominated, won," or
Mhm.
you're like, "Great experience, learned a ton." Either way, super positive. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. And again, it was all about being on brand. And when I think of something explosive, it had to hit you in the feels. And that was what I
yeah.
was trying to accomplish. And thank you to Mr. Alex Grohl, who created that music. I got it from royalty free Pixabay and following all the rules and doing things right. And for anybody making a podcast, I suggest you do the same. Don't be
You don't
silly.
want, yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want your content to be taken down after
N-
a lot of
no.
effort.
No, and that's a nice segue into what we're diving into tonight. A lot of the mistakes that we see podcasters making on the business side, even on the hobbyist side, some things that just really don't jive with the overall vibe of growing a successful podcast. And I know, Anna, this is something that you focus on very heavily. You gave a great presentation on this in Charlotte when I had the opportunity to join you for that or be at that conference with you and take in your presentation to the crowd. So let's just dig right into this. I'm sure you're seeing things every day. What jumps off the page at you in regards to mistakes that you see podcasters make when it comes to marketing their show?
Yes. Let's do it. I think the first thing that people need to think about, because I think they look at social media almost as these, it has to be picture perfect, it has to be this place that like is like a documentation of what happened, when in reality social media includes social in its name for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're taking, again, we can do marketing in different ways, but let's start with social media, because I think that that in itself is the easiest way to build connection with our audience, with our listeners. And as you know, and everyone watching right now, you're probably going to be agreeing with me when I say, when we publish an episode, when we're creating something, we want audience feedback. So why would we go on social media that is a social tool and use it as a broadcast channel? It's like, hey, this is what I've done, go listen. Hey, new episode is out, check it out. Like,
Yeah.
you're not asking for engagement, and that is number one reason why most people don't do well on social media, is that they don't use it as it's supposed to, right?
Right.
And we look at, like, especially like looking at big brands and stuff, like they're not bringing emotion, they're not bringing the humanity into it. And as podcasters, we have that intimacy built into the platform, so of course we have to lean in as like a person. And I would always say, like, if you look at what the big brands like Amy Porterfield, all the people who are creating online brands that they are personal, but they are really huge. Their goal has been to become more human on the platforms. So,
Hmm.
as podcasters, we sometimes appear as celebrities. And so, we have to remind ourselves that sometimes we have to go first to engage with people online, and we have to seek that engagement first. It's not enough to slap like a cover art on the feed and say, hey, new episode is out, right? That's not going to get people excited. So the first
Right.
thing that I want to invite people to think is you post something, but what is the listener or these audience members supposed to do next, right?
Right. Yeah.
Are they supposed to like? Are they supposed to comment? Are they supposed to send it to a friend? Are they supposed to share it on their stories? Are they supposed to send it on their WhatsApp group because it was hilarious? Really thinking about the type of behavior that we are asking our listeners to have is key, right?
Hmm.
Think about what is the value of these pieces, but also like how we want to create a behavior from that piece of content. And so, for instance, oh, we have some comments
We got
on
Mark
the
saying hello. What's up, Mark?
Hi, Mark. I think that, again, for instance, exactly what we're doing right now, we're acknowledging someone who joined in the comments. Like,
Hmm.
we want to talk to humans. We don't want to go through this whole feed or post any type of content and never acknowledge people. So, that is another mistake, right? I feel like I don't want to just like give away all of them, but I feel like it kind of like weaves in right now. How many times have I spoken to a client, a podcaster who is using the show as a business tool, and they haven't, they say, I'm like, I haven't had any engagement. It's like crickets.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I ask is like, hey, let's actually look into your social media. And
Smart.
oftentimes we go scroll, scroll, and we're like, oh, 2 comments here. Did you engage back? No. So, really
Hmm.
thinking about if we want people to engage with us, we can't just leave these 2 comments without responding because people see first, they look at us as a celebrity. So, they think that they
Yeah.
can't reach out to us. And then, second, if actually someone's reached out and the host didn't engage back, that's what the audience thinks. Oh, like, oh, they don't reply, they just post stuff here.
Yeah.
So it's such a good like moment to help the audience think about like, have you been engaging? It's like literally the simplest thing that one can do.
Mhm.
So that is something that is so easy. Now, um, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of that stems from what social media used to be. We used to be able to get more engagement just because the algorithm was in our favor back in the day. But
Well,
now
also
well, I mean, if you just, I mean,
inflated,
well, to some
inflated
degree,
reach.
yeah. But now that you put something out there, like you were saying, like you just put a post out there and you run away and you don't do anything with it to engage in any capacity. Sometimes that post doesn't even get seen. If it does, it's by a very, very small fraction of your following. So it's real hard. It's like throwing links into the void.
Yes. So I would say there are a couple of things, and I'm glad that you brought that up because there's 2 types of things that happened during the prior 3 years, 4 years. So
Mm,
one, the pandemic happened, so a lot of people were less busy than they are now. Right.
sure thing.
So people were online a lot more, and that actually contributed to a lot of the content getting more engagement.
Hmm.
Take the algorithm aside. And then number 2 is people are actually getting to the point of saturation. So because they've been consuming so much content,
Yeah.
um, the content that actually cuts through the noise is completely different than the type of content that cut through the noise 4 years ago. And so we have to adapt and understand what is working. And
Hmm.
yes, in some platforms, they're not showing as much of your content as before, but accounts are still growing, accounts are still blowing up and going viral. It's
Hmm.
just a different process. And so I think thinking about human behavior, and we can touch on those a little bit and kind of how that ties to the mistakes, but really thinking about how we probably ourselves are not as much online as we were before, right? So we
Yeah.
need to think about what is going to resonate with our listeners.
Yeah. And you're right. Taking into consideration the fact that we are so inundated with content. And these algorithms are trying to prioritize what they feel we want to see based on our habits and based on our consumption behavior. It can be difficult sometimes. If you can get through, you'll probably notice a trend start to develop where the same people are liking, commenting, being a part of that content that you share because they've proven they want to see it. Therefore, the algorithm is putting it in front of them. But it's a different world. And that's where, we talk about our mutual friend Megan Shields, who focuses big time on the advertising side of things. That to me is where I see social media. I mean, not saying organic strategies don't play a factor, but I still feel like advertising is becoming more and more prevalent and something podcasters have to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And I think thinking about the quality of the content, I still see people, even if you put money behind a post, if that post is not optimized for the platform that is going on, you're just wasting money. And what I
Yeah.
mean by this is if you are going on Instagram or TikTok and you're sharing a landscape video, like a rectangle as we are streaming right now,
Mm-hmm.
people are like, okay, what is this? And then they go and pinch the screen and try to see it, and they're like, I can't see well enough. Or
Yeah.
maybe there's text and the text is super small, and you honestly, like, I don't think my eyes are going bad, but my God, at some point on social media, everybody was using these like really tiny itty bitty fonts, the minimalistic fonts. I'm like, y'all, I can't read. What is wrong with y'all? Like, blow that up.
Yeah.
And so, when the content isn't optimized for consumption, which means for the medium that is being posted on, or the design is very like, normally I see a lot of people, honestly, y'all, less is more. I see a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
creating a lot of content that there's a ton of stuff happening. And in
Yeah.
terms of user behavior, if a user is confused and there's too much going on, people are not going to do anything at all. So
Yeah.
spread that across two posts or create a carousel post instead of like creating a ginormous text blob on the video, right?
Yeah.
Really thinking about, is this something that is nice to consume, or is this like a lazy thing that I'm doing right now? And
Yeah.
that's like really like gonna really impact the conversion of if that performs and resonates with the audience or not.
Well, I'm thinking about just the overall attention span that we have now, which is I just did a series about this on podcast theory, and the research I did 8.25 seconds is where we're at as adults in 2024,
Wow.
which is just mind blowing how low things are. But when you factor that in, the journey you're taking your viewer through, it has to be as easy and deliberate as it possibly can be. I had a friend send me a post the other day that had 5 calls to action, and it was
Ooh.
all about click here if you want to see this, and then DM me this if you want to see this, and if you like this, I'll send you. I was like, talk about overkill. And it made me think immediately to the podcaster who gets to the end of their guest appearance and gives 25 places that you can be looking for them.
Yes.
And there's no clear direction to things. I'm all that's we talked about this before we turned the mics on and turned the camera on tonight. This psychology of human behavior is really starting to grip my attention because I'm thinking about the attention spans. I'm thinking about that customer journey and how it literally feels like sometimes we have to grab them by the wrist and pull them through the store, much like we used to have, like we've had to do with our kids in the past. Like, what can we do to get them from A to B the easiest way possible? And a lot of it comes down to thinking this deep about what you're putting in front of them, how easy it is for them to consume, and ultimately what they're going to experience when that content is found.
Absolutely. And such a great point about like the customer experience. It's not that it has to be forced, but you really need to think about what happens. And again, if you're a business owner, if you're a podcaster, it's not enough to just sit down, turn on the mic, speak, and hit publish, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's not working anymore.
right.
I mean, I would like even a question if it did work for most people, but it is a challenge, but like I really think that people need to look into it as an opportunity, right? We have access to so much information, but also so many amazing uh, pieces of information that are distilled, right?
Mhm.
Talking about the user experience, talking about how to create better podcast content, how to create better hooks. I
Yeah,
feel like a lot of people get into and this is such an easy one to kind of resonate with, like lazy marketing or podcast promotion will yield lazy behaviors. So if you're not taking the time to create something that you're proud of and is exciting and again has logic to it, I mean, you can't expect that to perform. And I think that before everyone starts blaming algorithms, let's look at maybe what we've been sharing, and talking about the user path. So many people still use static images with the waveform moving.
Oh, the
There's
audio.
like nothing happening, right?
Nothing.
And 60% of people are on their phones with the sound off.
Right.
So at the very least, caption everything. And I see a lot of people not use captions because, and again, sometimes I'm like, oh, the post looks so pretty. I'm gonna mess it up visually. But really thinking about, purpose first. And if you're sharing something, if you're putting so much effort, make sure that everything is captioned, not only because is helping people with accessibility, but also to help the person. Because again, if people can't listen, they're going to scroll away. They're not even going to engage. They may, for instance, here on LinkedIn, they may read the description and engage with the description, but they're missing out on your voice, your likeness, like all of these things that it makes the experience better. So, really thinking about what the core is, the core experience, and how can we make it better before we even think about like hashtags or whatever. Like, really think about, are the basics covered?
I think it's our friend Mark that is watching with us and hanging out with us tonight who said that good content is going to beat the algorithm every single time. And I don't know if that was his direct quote. And if it is, Mark, I'm giving you credit. If it's not, please jump in and let me know who actually said that. And again, just from your conversation or conversations I've had with Mark, I know that that's how he feels. That's how I feel. It's all about the engagement that you create, but it starts with good content. And think of your own consumption behaviors. Do you stare at content that sucks? Do you stare at content that repels? No, you're looking for things that grab your attention. And if it doesn't, you're scrolling on. And that's the behavior that people have these days. If you're not thinking on that level of that first few seconds, grabbing them, it's hooking them, it's giving them a reason to stay invested in that content you share. Now, I move that type of mindset over to the podcast itself. And I'm kind of in this mode with what I put out on Podcast Theory over the last 3 weeks, doing this 5-part series. Like part 4 will go live at tomorrow as we sit and record tonight. But it's all about getting your listener to the reason they showed up as fast as possible with as little roadblocks and as little obstacles as you can possibly put in front of them. So no super long worded out intro that takes you a minute and a half to read. And then when you get into get past that and you're doing a 10-minute monologue, and then you're throwing housekeeping items in there. And all of a sudden it's 15 minutes deep and you haven't even got to your conversation yet. And that's why I showed up. With attention spans being what they are, you run a serious risk of a person not even hitting the fast forward button to get to it. They're just out.
Yeah.
I'm looking for good information on this specific subject. These people aren't getting me to it. I'm going somewhere where I can get what I want right now. And I believe that's the mindset that gets a lot of people totally uninvested in a podcast. And sometimes it's hard to get them back when that's what happens.
Yeah, 100%. And I was going to say, listeners' time is valuable. They, as us, we have limited time. So if we're not creating content that is helping them, educating them, entertaining them, inspiring them, we're not adding to their life. And again, people are selective. So they're going to move away. Even if the podcast was recommended, if there was someone who said, oh my God, this is a great podcast. I have people say that. And again, maybe I'm a little bit of a podcast snob. But
No.
I was like, oh my God, it's 5 minutes and you took me through ads, like a minute long intro, which is a laundry list of your achievements. And then you started on going on a tangent on this guest and how you know them. And I'm like, when are we getting the goods, y'all? Like, let's go.
Yeah. And I guess my plea or my cry, my request of all podcasters is to stop reading the bios and let your guests tell their story. Absolutely. They're going to be able to do that much more justice. And I've been a part of podcasts where the guest has read my bio and somehow found even more than I gave them. And I just kind of sit there for like 3 minutes. And it's like, you don't need to do all this. I'll tell everybody this story and you can just say, hey, Tell us about you, man.
Oh, okay. I actually don't like that because the ask me about yourself
Well, no,
because
you know, I obviously you're going to be,
right, do your research, but
yeah.
just in case people are listening, I'm like, I'll just ask them to introduce themselves. Like that is one time, and I did this. I was so tired. It was a long day, and I was interviewing in Portuguese because I'm originally from Portugal.
Hmm.
And it was the person introducing me was Brazilian. So they were talking from Portuguese from Brazil, which is slightly different. And the way they introduced me was slightly different than normal. And so they said, like, oh, introduce yourself to the audience. And I was like, hi, I'm Anna. And they're like, okay,
Nice
tell
to
us a
meet
little
you.
bit about you. And I was like, oh, God, okay, sorry. Long day. And it was a live stream. It's on the internet for everybody's viewing pleasure if you want to listen to me speaking
That's
Portuguese.
awesome.
But again, like I was just like, and he gave me an amazing intro. He did.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, I zoned out. I was like, hi, everybody. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm supposed to be an
At
expert.
least you got your name right. I
Oh my
mean,
God. Nothing wrong on his side. I guess I zoned out. But yeah,
funny.
think about you want to guess like when I my show is on in between seasons right now, but when I did some interviews, I didn't do a lot, but I would always find three things why I thought my guest was extraordinary and that was relevant for my audience. And
Mm,
so that was like the three core things, like really cool, neat stuff. They're going to get the listener to be like, oh my gosh, I really want to listen to this.
yeah.
And then weave the rest of all the things that I know, the laundry list of achievements of my guest, weave that into the questions,
Hmm.
which helps when it's promoting the episode and you're trying to cut segments and it becomes a self-contained segment that you can use to promote the episode on social. Haha,
Yeah.
see what I did there? Brought us back. Um,
Well done.
but I think that there's definitely like different ways in experimentation. And
Yeah.
Jay Klaus, the creator of Creative Science and
Hmm.
host of the podcast and company, he said that really like we have to create great content that people come back to and stuff, but
Hmm.
like I think that is so important when you're thinking like why are people coming back, right?
Yeah.
And we often don't craft stuff that is engaging enough for people to come back. So again, um people have short attention spans. When we're creating content, we have to create the best possible content. It doesn't mean that it has to be perfect. That's
Mhm.
the side note. It has to be great in terms of value.
And that's something that you can be proud of. And it speaks a lot to that legacy piece that comes up a lot with podcasting. As long as you're not taking this content down, this is going to live on and be something that people can experience far after you've ventured off this little marble that we're floating around on. That means a lot to me. I think about that with the content that I'm creating. This is something that's a part of me. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something I enjoy talking about. And I'm hoping when others find it, they're able to feel that and they're able to get something from it as well. That's what makes the content great. And of course, the conversations that we're having, that all leads to something that hopefully it's engaging the right audience. That's the idea. When they find this, they can enjoy it, they can be moved, maybe even get 1% better at what they're doing. That
Yeah.
means a lot to me. I think that's the level we all should be getting to as content creators. It's not just about throwing garbage out onto the internet. And I know I've had this conversation with people. I'll ask you the same question, Anna. Have you ever thought about the deathbed scenario and looking back on what you've put into the world? Would you be proud of what you've done or would you be ashamed? Now I know what you create. You create great stuff. So you'd probably be proud. But to the general person that's just throwing a bunch of bullshit out there, they're going to look back and be happy and say, that's the legacy that I left on the World Wide Web. Ooh, it's not pretty.
Yes. And there's something that I want people to think about. When I was interning at a radio station back home in Portugal, um, it was a Friday, and I promise the story is relevant. It was a Friday, and my mentor at the time, he was supposed to receive like a press release with like some information that we needed to incorporate on a piece that was going to go Monday morning, first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we got told, oh, the guy who's writing the press release, he's gone, but he will, he's going to be back over the weekend, and he's going to be like writing that. You'll get that on your inbox, early enough. Like, great.
Hmm.
And basically, it's like night on a Monday, and we're like, we haven't received anything. Oh my God, what's going on? So we called the place, and they said he passed away over the weekend. He had an accident.
Oh no.
And that always, always stuck with me. What is the
Yeah.
last piece of content on your profile or that podcast episode, and what is it going to say about you and the legacy you leave?
Wow, that's incredibly deep.
Right? And I was like 21 at the time. And I remember that stuck with me. I'm 35 now. I never forgot that moment because I always thought about like when you die, like, we're getting super deep here, but
It's
like,
fine.
what are you not only like what are you leaving, but are you living your legacy and the values you live by
Hmm.
consistently versus like every now and again something happens, you're like, oh yeah, that thing that I said I was passionate about, or that thing that I say matters to me, and you kind of like forget about it and go about your life and then eventually come back. Like,
Hmm.
incorporate that in every single thing you do. um, at every given moment of your life, and you will live a life that when you're in your deathbed or whatever, like, you inspired people. Because again, we think about like these, especially in America, people think about like, oh, to live a legacy has to be like a huge thing, like it
Hmm.
has to be like a touch the lives of thousands. I mean, if you improved the life of one, that was a life that was worth living in a way, right? Like, you were able to improve someone's life and make it better for some reason.
Yeah.
And I always think about that, how, like, can you choose to be kind? Can you choose to give versus like take, right? Like, I
Hmm.
always talk about like building karma and podcast karma, where you go and you like leave someone a review, or you support someone just to help the algorithm show it to more people. Like, what are the micro actions we can take every single day to help us, help our audience, help those around us? And it's not difficult. It's kind of like it just compounds. If you say, oh, this little thing, I have 5 minutes, what can I do that's a good thing for someone, right?
Hmm.
Like, those really help. And I think podcasters think that like we have to have, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000, a million downloads to have like change someone's life.
Hmm.
And I often connect that to books. Like, you know how authors passed away, and most of them, like, they only achieve real fame like years after that death, and their books became like world renowned and legacy and whatever. Like, as
Right.
podcasters, we have the capacity to do it right now. And like, what
Yeah.
an amazing time it is that you can create something and still see the impact of it.
You're absolutely right. And that power of one is huge. And it's almost in reverse when you think about what you said. As podcasters, we often have this thought of thousands of downloads, millions of downloads. That's going to predicate success. That means that this was the right thing to do. But like you said, who is that really impacting? And when you really think about it and reverse engineer it, it's impacting you because you're looking at it and saying, wow, I created something that a million people wanted to listen to,
Mhm.
versus looking at the opposite way, that I created something deep and meaningful that somebody that I've maybe never met, or even somebody that's in my circle, was moved by, and they absolutely felt it for real, and there was real change, and I made a difference in one person's life today. That's something you can feel. I think a lot about, I've always said this, my grandfather and my uncle that have passed away, the stories that we would all tell, and just the fun that we all used to have. This was before I was a podcaster. If I would have had a freaking microphone back then, just to get some of that stuff recorded to relive, I wouldn't care if that would get beyond my four walls. But that was just, those were memories in my life that I would love to relive. And I think a lot about that with people that might find my podcast, whether they're entertained, whether they're learning something, if they can go back and continue to get something from that long after I'm out of here, that means a lot. That to me is the legacy. And if it hits one person in a profound way, I've done my job.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's, I think, something that I want to talk about is a lot of people get discouraged when they post something online and only 5 people created, no, didn't create it, they liked it or they
Yeah.
commented.
Yeah.
And when we think as business owners, especially this is for the podcaster who runs a business, back in the day, like you had to go door to door. Can you imagine going door to door to sell your products and to tell how amazing your product or
Yeah.
knowledge can help a community? Today
Mm,
we have the capacity to do it from our homes,
push of a button.
right? And
Mm,
people forget about that, how important it is to think about like everything is relative, but like the freedom that we get to access. Like I had students that were in Australia and Mexico, and
mm,
like I'm like, this is amazing. Like I can, help these people that are like 1,000 miles away. Maybe I'll never meet them, but through the power of podcasting, like I've changed them, and
yeah.
they've come to find out about me. So I think a lot of people don't think about that, and there's, if there's 5 downloads there or whatever, um
Mhm.
it's 5 people that found value in what you
Yeah.
have, right? Like when this is where I think we have to like relativize, no, to put it in relative terms. There we go.
Hmm.
So I have to always ask myself, if I was in a cafe that is like super intimate and I have 5 people, and these 5 people are listening to what I have to say and they're really paying attention and engaging, like that's awesome. I think
Yeah.
we look at like the big numbers, which are inflated for most people. Like at the session that I did when you were at the podcast conference at Empower
Mm.
Podcasting, um, I shared like how many people here in this room know a millionaire, and only Megan raised her arm, and I'm like, okay, one out of like 25 or 30 or 40. I can't recall how many people were there,
Hmm.
and like that's the same thing. Like not everyone will get a reach of millions, but that's okay, because like you're leaving your legacy. What a time we live in, that you have a thought you want to share with the world, and you can.
Yeah. Sometimes when I look at numbers, which I don't do often because I don't believe that's why I'm creating what I create. It's got a deeper meaning than that. And the numbers are going to fall into place as more people pick up on that meaning and get invested in this. But every time I get the feeling of getting down about something maybe not performing as well as I expected, I remind myself, dude, you have a little studio in your house that you can now communicate with the whole world through because the World Wide Web allows it. Many people did not have that.
Many
Many
people still
people
don't have
and
access
many
to
people
it.
still don't have that. Exactly. So you're in a pretty good position that maybe that piece of content did not perform the way you thought it might, but you can sit down and do another one and you can keep doing this as much as you want. Like I've said many times, I got addicted to doing this live streaming thing the second I started doing it. And it was always this geek out moment of, my God, I get to go live to the globe if the globe were to show up to listen. This wasn't a thing back even 10 years ago. I mean, it probably was on the internet, but it was a lot more complicated than just pressing
More
a
than
go
10
live
years.
button,
Yeah, let's
right?
say 20. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was in college and I was in communications, I was doing radio, I was doing television production. This is all studio based. This was
Yeah, how
all
many people were doing what you're doing right now?
no,
Because,
that's
right?
yeah,
Like you needed 5 to 7 people to do exactly what you're doing right now by yourself.
exactly right. Exactly right. We live in amazing times and we get to take advantage of this internet. And again, like you said it perfectly on it, it may not reach a million people, but it doesn't have to. It needs to reach the right people. When we can start redefining success in that capacity, we're going to all be much more happy in regards to being a content creator, in regards to being a podcaster. It's just going to put things in more realistic terms and it looks much more attainable because someone on the outside of this looking in saying, I would love to do a podcast, I would love to do a live stream, thinking that the only way to do it is to hit a million people, they need to know, sometimes it's not even about who's listening or watching right now. It's about the conversation that's taking place between the two people making it happen. That to me
Absolutely.
is as valuable as it gets.
Yeah, you can literally, and this is something that is like so cool. Like, I got to interview my dream guests on the podcast. Like, those interviews haven't been released yet, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I always say, like, people are not as out of reach as you think. I normally joke, like, how there's like is there like the 7 steps of Kevin Bacon or something?
The 6 degrees or 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in podcasting, it's only 2 or 3,
Yeah.
because everyone, like, we think that as podcasters, content creators, oh, everybody creates. But like, there was a study done, especially like on LinkedIn. They were talking about how like only 4% or 1% of people who are on LinkedIn actually create, everybody else just consumes. And when you think
Really?
about it like that, yeah, yeah, it's really, really low. I
Wow.
was like, wow, like this is insane. Because from our perspective, because we're creators, we tend to consume content that creators develop.
Hmm.
But there's the majority of people who are on LinkedIn actually are consumers. And
Wow.
so we think that the market is saturated. We think that like there's no point in doing this, that there's a lot of competition, when in reality, it isn't as hard to reach to reach your community, but also to reach the people you want to reach. Like you would be able to at some point, and again, it has to do with doing a good pitch, to do like your homework, to maybe engage with that person on social media for years,
Hmm.
and then pitch and say, hey, I would love to have you on my show. Like the capacity to have people who you only dream of to have on your show, that's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
again, where else like can you get access to the people that you admire the most? I mean, unless they're dead.
Yeah. It's networking at its finest. That's how I've always looked at this in regards to making these connections. Man, you have such an opportunity, and it levels the playing field in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
If you get somebody to join you on a podcast, you may feel like they are light years ahead of where you are, or you aspire to get to where they are. But when you're on the podcast together, it's just two human beings having a conversation about very like-minded subjects, like things you're both passionate about. And that can bring a person that may seem way up here right to this level, and all of a sudden you're creating something special for both people involved, but then the audience that takes it in gets to feel that impact as well.
Yeah,
Pretty
and
freaking cool.
very cool. And something that, if you're looking from the perspective of if you want to increase the quality of your network or show up as a thought leader,
Hmm.
there's something that is association by proxy. And basically, when
Right.
you have a ton of thoughtful, known experts in an area, and you are always interviewing them, people are going to start associating you with their level of expertise, with their level of influence.
Yeah.
And that is one of the easiest ways to grow your influence online, is by tapping into people's networks and people's brand power. And not enough people, again, how many years ago someone was like in the middle of like rural America, and now you can talk to someone who is in New York or LA, and you can build
Yeah.
those connections with people who it may be a one-off time where you like meet them, but they come become your best friends or like partners in business, or just all of these possibilities that you never know. And it's like when you move away from what does the likes mean, the shares, the downloads, like when you move away from that, you actually focus on the experience of having an amazing experience and providing value to the audience and
Hmm.
being consistent with it. Like, you're gonna grow as a person, your brand's gonna grow, your influence is gonna grow, and it goes beyond just the, oh, I have 500 downloads on my show this month. Like, it
Bingo.
doesn't matter.
What you're speaking to, it hits hard for me because this is all about the intangibles, and in so
Mhm.
many ways that's more important, that's more valuable. And to really lump this into the theme of what we're talking about with some of these mistakes that you make, I believe this is one of the biggest reasons that, or this is one of the biggest mistakes that a person can make not starting a podcast, because you're not going to get to experience all of these intangibles, all of these skills that you learn, how to have a good conversation, how to be an active listener, how to speak clearly and tell your story with confidence. These are all skills that translate to other areas and other aspects of your life. And if you're not taking the time to enjoy what's in front of you, and you're upset because you were hoping to get 500 downloads, but you only got 100 downloads, you're looking at it the wrong way. Because even if you got 100 downloads, for one, you impacted 100 people. Two, that number isn't static. That number is always going to grow. When more people find your show, it's inevitable that they're going to start listening to other episodes that you've created. And at the end of the day, you've now developed a new relationship if you had a guest, or you've put more good content into the world as a solo podcaster, showcasing that you are an expert in your field, that you do have passion for what you're bringing to the table. These are all the things that podcasting can deliver. And talk about brand growth coming from that cannot be duplicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, I'm very curious for you, what has been something that like externally, not like internally, but what has this podcast enabled you to do that you would have never thought about being possible? Or maybe it's not this one that happened, or maybe a previous podcast.
I think for me, overall, I've been doing this for 10 years roughly. We're coming up on 10 years now, which is crazy. I know for a fact I am now 100% more comfortable speaking on stage or being in front of a group of people and just flowing. Not saying that I ever struggled with it, but I do know just from the difference I think back of presentations and things I've done in the past versus where I'm at now, I know there's a marked difference. And I know it's because I'm on the microphone now more than ever,
Yeah.
but I've developed a skill set in regards to having a conversation that is translated to the other things in my life. It's made me more confident to pursue bigger speaking opportunities. And that's what I'm putting a lot of emphasis on as we roll out of 2024 and into 2025. That's what I really want to look at for the new year. Where can I get to? I set the goal of a TED Talk. That's
Nice.
where I want to get to. And I'm aiming for the biggest stage I could possibly get to. That's how much confidence I've gained in my ability to present. And I thank the podcasting medium for that because it's given me this outlet to practice, to work on shtick in some cases, maybe if I want to do something a little bit more entertaining. But overall, I think doing it live as well and working without a net, there's a I'll tell you, this is a funny thing that I noticed. I used when I would do pre-recorded videos and things like that, I would, my God, the editing room floor, you could hardly walk across it. It was just clips. It was just like, I hated it. I would cut up so much stuff and I would do all these things. And when I went into the live environment, I got into that. And because I was live, I wasn't making those mistakes. The second I sat down to do a pre-recorded video, I instantly started making mistakes again. And I just said to myself, like, dude, get out of your own head and pretend you're live. Just pretend this is live. And when I did that, everything changed. So the lesson here for me, and I know this is going to be different for everybody, I feel more comfortable in a live environment with no net than I do with a net, which is freaking nuts. But I don't think I could have said that 10 years ago. There's no way in hell I would
Yeah.
have said that 10 years ago.
And that is amazing. And again, similar thing happened to me because English is not my first language. I really struggled, and especially like I would always do the production side. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily have to come on mic. When I was in Portugal, I did live radio. When I went to London, I did co-host podcasts. But like there was always like that fear of standing on myself and hosting a weekly podcast for 72 episodes. Like I noticed so much of a difference in confidence as well. And
Mm-hmm.
the amount of times that people who don't necessarily like, I know that they don't comment, but they like, and then years after they come to me and they go, that one thing that you said on a video or on a post
Yeah.
really helped me get to this point. And I'm like, oh my God, I did not imagine that that was the thing. So, like, again, internal work, external work, and showing up and doing, like, living your best life. It kind of sounds a little like, meh, but like, it's
Mm-hmm.
true. Like, you're really like leading by example, which to me, it's so important to show up and lead by example with the small things that you're thinking like nobody cares, but I want to do it just for the sake of it, and it will change someone's life. And actually, in a bit, I actually want to talk a little bit about the different types of audiences because this is so important for people to understand. So I see that there's a comment.
Yeah. This is Heather, who I used to work with back in the day. And thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. I don't remember you ever having problems speaking. Yeah, I guess that's true. I think, again, a lot of it, I think that when I was working that job where Heather and I worked together, I really, no, I had not tapped into podcasting yet. So that really hadn't become much of a thing in my life. It was shortly after that job had ended where I got into podcasting. So I guess there were some skills already there. The foundation was slightly laid, and
Or
now we're tacking onto it.
I think it is also like how you see yourself,
Mhm.
right? Like others may see you confidently, but if you don't see yourself confidently, you're not gonna go and get the gigs and try the things that are scary. So at least
True.
podcasting shows you that you can do this, that you've like it's just like the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And basically like you realize that yes, you can do it. Like otherwise you wouldn't be able to do how many episodes, how many hours. Like if you were to count the amount of hours you've done, right? Like the reps you've done, you'd be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like that is no wonder I feel so much more confident because you had all of these hours to implement all of that.
No question about it. There's again, when you think about the intangibles, it makes the numbers less relevant. Not saying that they don't have a role or they don't play a role in what you're trying to accomplish, but if you can look at the whole scope and really take all that in and factor in the skill sets that you walk away with, you start treating this differently for sure. Well, let's talk about the audiences that you were saying.
Yes.
So please dive into that. I know
Okay.
that this is huge, so I want to hear more about this.
Yes. So when we post something, whatever it is, there's different types of audiences. And understanding that different audiences will engage in different ways and that this sub audiences are in different sizes really helps us stay motivated when we're publishing content and something doesn't land. Before I move into that, I just want to say something that it came to my mind so fast. I can't recall who wrote this on LinkedIn, but someone said sometimes the reason why content doesn't resonate with your audience is because you are a visionary and they're not ready to hear it yet, or they're not in a phase, or the industry is not in a phase where they can hear and connect with what you're saying. And I was like, oh, that is amazing.
That is very true. Yeah.
You can be a visionary, especially podcasters. They tend to be in positions of leadership. They
Hmm.
tend to be people who are thought leaders and who are daredevils. So I'm like,
Yeah.
that kind of checks out. And I'm like, oh, every time you post something and it doesn't resonate, I'm like, the audience isn't ready for it yet. That is a good hack. But
For sure.
so let's start thinking about that. Sometimes it's not that like the piece didn't resonate or whatever, is like maybe they're not ready for that.
Hmm.
So when we're looking at our audiences, we have different types. We have our super fans. So our people who, no matter what we post, they're always there. They're always in the comments. They're always on, like on Spotify commenting saying that they appreciate the show. Or
Hmm.
they're always the people who know every single time we post, they see, they engage, they're there. These are not a lot of people. These are like just like our friends. We have like our hardcore friends who are like, we're super close. They know everything about our life, right? So thinking about like our social circles really helps. And I'm going to connect those two.
Yeah.
So then we have our kind of occasional friends. So we only hang out with these people when we have specific activities or things that we want to get into. So for instance, like I have friends who are going into yoga and they have the yoga friends, or they're like mental retreat. And so how that resonates to podcast audiences is they only kind of engage with content that maybe is about specific content buckets that you talk about, like topics that you talk about. So they don't engage with everything. They're a
Hmm.
bit bigger than the super fans, right? So there are people that will select episodes based on title, for instance, or the need that they have. And then we have our like kind of friends of friends. And these are the people who came to you through like a guest or someone shared your stuff and they started following your account or following your podcast. But they're like really hit and miss. They kind of like it's so unique what they engage with because it's so narrow, right? So
Hmm.
it's either through the expertise of the guest that they came through and they kind of like vibed with you, so they stayed, but they don't always engage. And then
Yeah.
there's the acquaintances, right? So these are like the people, they're like the friends of friends that you don't even like see very frequently, or people who you're like, I don't know, they're like the people who like came out in your life and left. And
Hmm.
these are people who are just like not they're again, they're like the ones that are really hard to predict their behavior. They came through maybe like social through like they search for a topic, they were interested in it for a while, like let's say for podcasting, they were interested in it for a while, and they come seasonally. They come, they engage with stuff, and then they leave, and then they come back. But this is like a really weird like behavior. And
Yeah.
then the window shoppers are the people who are like you worked with years ago, your family, your friends, like the people that you collect through life. And these people can follow you for years. And I have so many people like this. And then one day you do one thing, like you share a win, or you share a struggle, or you share something more about your personal life other than the podcast, and these
Hmm.
people come out of the woodwork and they're suddenly like, oh my
Yeah.
god, so and so, what happened, or like, I believe in you, you can do this. And I'm like, where did you come from? And right, like, these people will be huge in your social media. These are people that, like, if you met them at a bar and you asked them something randomly, they would go like, oh yeah, because 2 months ago you had that thing that happened. And you're like, you've never engaged with my content, how do you know this? So
Yeah.
they're like the window shoppers, they're like the lurkers, they
Hmm.
follow what you're doing. And so we have to stop expecting that every single person that follows you is going to become a super fan, because you personally don't do that either, right?
Very true. Very true.
You have your favorites, and then you have
Yep.
like the other ones that are like, ah, this person is annoying me, unfollow, and then you come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, or you just keep watching them to be annoyed. Like, I need that in my life for some reason.
Right, or to push you, to trigger you in a good way, right? Because you, like,
Yeah.
they are where you want to be.
Well, I purposely follow people that I don't agree with so I don't get jaded in my own perspectives. I like to see
Mm.
what other people are thinking about and talking about. I don't have to agree with it, but I also don't have to be triggered by it either. There's a
Mm.
word of or a lesson for the rest of the internet. But
But
heed my words, folks.
But yeah, like, that's a good point. Like, follow people so you're not in a silo, in an ecosystem where you're just hearing everything. Like, that's why it's important to not just follow like your peers, because you'll
Yeah.
feel like every tiny victory, you're like, ah, everybody is doing better than I am. Everyone
Mhm.
is like winning, or everyone is putting better content than I am. So sometimes following the common folk
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
important.
Well, that's the thing too. There's a lot of creative people out there, and they don't have to have massive followings to be deemed creative.
True.
They can have a few people that are following and liking what they're doing, and if you're one of them, great. As long as it entertains you, you're only spending a few minute chunks on these platforms. You don't want to be spending that time miserably. You want to be spending it enjoying yourself, if nothing else, just to kill a few minutes. But why look at hate for that time period? Look at something that you love. And if you're putting content into the world that helps serve people in that nature, you're doing your job. Keep doing it. Like, Anna, I've been doing my little good morning series on Instagram.
Oh my
That's
God, I love that
is
so much.
I know you were the one of the ones that commented about how much you love the series, and it's just about having some fun, and it gives me an opportunity to vent a little bit of the things that annoy me in the world. So
And again, why is it? Why did I engage? Because I started noticing there was a pattern. You were consistent, right?
yes.
Like, you're like, let me experiment with this. And
Hmm.
there's that element of like, old man, get out of my lawn kind of thing
Oh yeah, yeah.
that I loved. And I was like, I'm not normally that kind of person, but I'm like, I resonate with the authenticity of it.
Yeah.
I'm no nonsense. So I was like, love this series. I've been cursed on it. And you screenshot it, and I was like, God damn it. But it cracked me up. I was like, oh
Oh,
my
I
gosh.
I thought about that when I did that screenshot. I'm like, oh, she could be mad that I've got her swearing from my DMs on. I'm like,
I swear
we
a
all
lot
swear.
in person, not normally like on social, but
Well,
yeah, if
you've been
you,
exposed, to those
oh my
50,
God,
those
I'm going to
50,
be canceled because I
yeah, those
curse.
50 people that watch my Instagram stories are canceling you as we speak.
And now we're on LinkedIn and it's recorded forever.
Well, we didn't physically say it, and now that's
Right.
that's now vanished. It's only a 24-hour period. So,
True.
well,
They'll never know.
as we get close to the end here, Anna, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about mainly. I mean, we'll talk about seasons because I know that you are doing that with your podcast. It's something that I believe in as well. I'm transitioning to the next phase of this podcast, which we'll talk about towards the end of what will be the end of season 2,
Mhm.
probably in October or early November. But before we get to that, obviously we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and clearly your time in this space has opened up a lot of opportunities. You've gained a wealth of knowledge. But what's one thing from your story that you'd like to share with us that really made podcasting jump out at you and say, this is where I need to be? I want to make a difference in this part of the world. How does your story interweave with you being this epic podcaster that you've become?
Stop it. So the funny thing is that when I was studying journalism, I actually already was doing podcasting. We didn't have a radio station, so everything was like you were literally assembling episodes, putting them out, picking a title, writing show notes, all the things.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was already in 2008 that I was doing this. And then I moved to the UK after working in radio. And it's so funny because, again, like for whatever reason, radio felt a little like stiff and kind of like formatting and like not as exciting. And again, this was back in 2008. So like
Yeah.
a lot has changed.
Oh yeah.
And I moved to the UK and I could not, for the life of me, get a job in radio because everybody had the same thought. Let's go to London and work in radio. So
Hmm.
I. Of course. So I got involved in online radio. And so basically, it was a combination of live streaming with podcasting.
Hmm.
And I really enjoyed that. It was very creative. And while I was doing that, I was doing the odd jobs of like working in cafes and like everybody does, right? Doing all the things like working in shops like clothes shops. And then
Hmm.
I started working in a nonprofit, working as a communications officer. And that taught me a lot about like how to create an impact and really like again, I was already that kind of person. But quickly that got me into the have a purpose, have a mission, mean something, but also have to do marketing with a very limited budget.
Yeah.
And I was
I
like,
can imagine that.
interesting. Yeah, moved here, started working in live streaming here in the US. And then I was working with basically any type of client who would show up. The studio would, like get clients. And then you, as the podcast producer, would be paired up with a business owner who wanted to have a podcast. And I
Hmm.
was like, like, I want to go back to like the feeling of like, have it some sort of meaning and to do things that are either educational or make an impact in the world.
Hmm.
So that got me to, in early 2020, before the event we all know happened, to
What
launch
happened
my
then?
company. Oh, yeah, right. What was it?
Yeah.
Like, I can't wait for the moment when we're like, what was it again? What
Yeah,
was it?
I
Because it's
don't
so
foresee
behind
that.
us.
Yeah, that won't happen anytime soon. But
Yeah, I don't think so. But basically got me back to like to focus on working with clients who have a message to who want to create an impact. And as a multilingual, as a woman, as a minority, like I know how hard it is to build yourself up to effectively like, especially if you've moved countries and you have no network and you're just starting from scratch, it's so hard to
Mhm.
make it work. And so I wanted to support those people who are like so incredibly knowledgeable, but like have so much imposter syndrome and get stuck on the things that don't matter. And so I feel like all of that weaved into like do the work that I do today. And so much of me starting my own podcast was one, initially as an agency, I was like, I don't have the capacity to do it. But once I moved away from agency to become a consultant, to become like an educator and a coach, like it really freed me. And I was like, I really want to do it to empathize with the business owner, all the phases, like and really understand what it does. And I wanted to show up on video because I was like, how many women who are multilingual? I don't have a strong accent, but you can tell I have an accent, right? Like,
Mhm.
I want people who see me and feel inspired to do so. So, through my journey, like when I launched the company, every single step I took in podcasting is to show, not tell, how to get into podcasting. And I feel like that if is every single moment I'm doubting myself or a client comes to me and they have doubts, I'm like, okay, that's me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to test it. And then I'm going to tell you how it went. And that has been every single moment that like, I'm like, yes, I'm meant to do this.
That's
So
a
it's not just a big moment, it's micro steps.
no, that's a beautiful story, and it really it speaks to the progression of going through everything, ultimately sticking to it. There's a lot of people that would run into a lot of those roadblocks that you did and say, "Well, this isn't for me. I'm out. I'm gonna go do something else." But you stuck to it because you felt the passion. You felt a calling. I know
Mm-hmm.
I could speak to that too. I knew when I started like this, the first podcast I ever did wasn't the greatest episode, but I just felt so round peg, round hole. I just felt like I had found my place. I want to be on the microphone. I want to be doing this. I know I have to work my ass off to get better. And here we are, 10 years later, still working, still
I
trying to
love that.
actually figure out if I can do this or not. But here we are. Anyway.
Well,
So,
I always look at like how I was 5 years ago before I became an entrepreneur, because I'll tell you,
Mm.
entrepreneurship is the inner work you didn't ask for.
Oh,
But
hell yeah.
I will always look back and like Anna that landed in London, and she thought she knew English. She was a good international student. She was like, I'm so good with English. And then I started like talking to British people. I'm like, what is going on? And like to see how confidently I can show up talking today, like also is
Mhm.
honoring your past self, right? Like never
Yeah.
thinking that this would be possible. So that's something that like I think it's important to think about too. Like how are you improving yourself?
You're absolutely right. Well, to wind down, like I said, I wanted to touch on your seasonal approach because I myself am a big fan of that. I highly recommend it to all new podcasters, at least as a starting point. It's a great way to get your feet wet, to get content out there, to feel the impact of building a podcast and bringing that content to the world. So, on the other side of it, very efficient, and it allows you to take breaks. You said you're in between seasons. Isn't it nice to just be able to kick back
Oh
for a
my
minute
God.
and not be thinking about doing an episode this week?
Hmm.
So, what made you say this is the way for me to go with my podcast? Was it something that you thought about right from the start, or did it morph into a seasonal production for you?
Well, initially it was going to be episodic.
Okay.
So what happened was, and this is where I've been super transparent with the podcast. So I got to a point where my husband and I are moving states. And I knew already in June or whenever I stopped my season. And so it was a combination personally for me where I was like, I don't have the capacity to go through the summer where I had a lot of work, and then I also like knew the move was coming, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. Plus, I really wanted to do a lot of like the legwork that is like improving the SEO of the website, like things that are important. I mean, even though my website's SEO is really good,
Yeah.
I was like, there's a lot of things that I've not been doing. And then to keep it real, I felt like it was like a Tuesday night and I was still recording or editing to have the show go live on a Wednesday, because it's like doctors are
Yeesh.
the worst patients, right? They're
Yeah.
like, I can do it, so why not do it? So I was like, this is not good. So I brought it back. These were all the reasons, but then strategically I was like, actually I want to test, because a lot of my content on Instagram is about like I share, document a lot of what I'm doing with clients, what I'm testing, what works, what doesn't. And I was like, actually, last summer I worked through the summer. I had episodes going on every single week. And I was like, I actually want to look at the data and see what the data says. So, from
Yeah.
the perspective of experimentation, I was
Mhm.
like, I actually want to see, because clients come to me and they go, "Oh, Anna, like, will it be good for me?" And for business owners who are a little flaky sometimes, breaking into a season, it's the death of the podcast,
Yeah.
because they can't get themselves to start a show. But for business owners who are like really serious and know that that is a good strategy, is really good, because you can do self-contained seasons that align with your business goals. So
Bingo.
you say, if I want to focus, like let's say I have a product launch, you focus exclusively on the thing that product is related to, right? Like you create enthusiasm around there. Or maybe it is because you want to test something new in your business and you want to see how it resonates. Or maybe you just want to test that out, that material, and see, do I actually can see myself talking about this thing as I
Mhm.
progress into a new industry? So I think that that's a really good point. Why are you turning, why did you decide to do seasons actually?
Well, for me, I look at it from the business side of things. It's about time and it's about efficiency, and those are the two things that I feel that when businesses and brands start a podcast, they're not factoring in enough.
Yes.
I want to start a podcast because somebody told me I should, or I think it looks like the big thing that will get my brand to the next level. Whatever the reason for starting is, typically what the people that are in a position of guru status or expert status, got to be weekly, got to be more than two a week or whatever. Like they're preaching quantity over quality. And for a brand new podcaster that has never done this before, on top of all of the other responsibilities that you have in running your business, to try to add in full-time podcasting is a tremendously tall order. So, thinking about it from an efficiency standpoint, why should you chain yourself to a microphone trying to do this content when you really haven't developed the skill set yet. You end up hating the process a few episodes in. Why are we putting ourselves in that position? And I started looking at, when I really started to realize this, I started looking at numbers and saying, we got all these people telling other podcasters they need to be out there 2 to 3 times a week. Yet 90% of podcasts aren't getting past 2 or 3 episodes. Major disconnect for me. So I started thinking, what's a better way to make this more feasible for a business owner or for an entrepreneur, a coach, a consultant, a professional at any level? How can they bring podcasting into their world and not be overwhelmed by it? And the answer was, it's like a punch in the face. Do it in seasons. Build a resource that is pointing to the most important aspects of your business, things you talk about every day anyway. Something that if people discover you through the podcast, they can use that as a resource to build trust in you. Or if they discover you through another means and they're not quite ready to move forward with a buying decision, no problem. Check out our podcast in the meantime. We'll follow up in a week or two, but you're going to learn more about how we can help you through that medium. We did a whole season on what we've been talking about today. That to me makes more sense for a business than trying to put yourself in a position, even if you're batch recording and getting a lot of episodes lined up, there's still a lot of work involved with that. With seasons, you can be incredibly strategic. You can lay out that content. You can have it all recorded and batched, and then you can put it out for your audience to consume. I like doing it all at once like Netflix does. That way you can set up the binge effect, and we're in a binge culture. So we're playing to that emotion. As a business owner myself, I know that I can look at a season and say, I'm only getting to this point, and then I can take a little break, recharge, recalibrate. I'm going to have a big announcement about what I'm doing with my podcasts when I close up the seasons of Let's Blow This Up and Podcast Theory, because it kind of hit me. I need to be making a couple changes here. And if I'm going week to week, it's harder to do that, especially if you've got months of content batched out. Harder to make those transitions. That, for me, that's a long-winded answer to your question, Anna, but I feel that business owners have to start looking at it that way, because not only does it make things more efficient on production, you get so much content that you can work with in your off season.
Yes.
So if you use that content right and repurpose it well, it's going to carry you through the off season and keep your audience engaged in what you're doing.
And I will add, if you don't promote it at all, you can actually see how bad your marketing strategy is. So if you're not promoting it to new people, like for instance, for me, I got 50% less downloads and I promoted the episode one time. One time in almost 2 months and a half. And 50% are still running. Right. And so that's when I'm like, you can see the glass half full or half empty. But like, if you get zero downloads, well, maybe you need to invest in discoverability for your podcast so that you're not doing it all the time. So food for thought there. And,
for sure.
Right. And so improving the quality. I love what you said about focusing on improving the if you want to have a new intro, if you want to dig into the numbers and maybe try a new format, or maybe hire out an editor to do, or hire out a copywriter, right? Like you can't do this when it's like the day to day. So definitely agree.
Yeah. And I think when we reach that point of burnout, it comes down to a lot of times, like you said, you were Tuesday night getting Wednesday's episode ready. If that's the constant pattern, that will catch up with you.
Absolutely.
It's a horrible way to try to do this, because eventually you're just gonna be like, F this. I'm gonna go over here and do something else, and then eventually your show just falls off of the priority list completely.
Absolutely, especially if the podcast is not a lead generation for your business, if you don't have clarity on what it is that the podcast is doing for you and your business or for your life, you're not going to get any result, and you're going to get burned out and frustrated, and you're just going to do it for the sake of it, and the quality is going to go down, and at the end of the day, you're like, what am I doing with my life?
You're absolutely and you know, that's a tremendous way to wrap this up, to think about, like, to get to that point with a podcast, man, you don't want to feel that way. Believe me, I felt it. There's been times, and that's where whenever I've gotten to that point, that's when I knew time to recalibrate. It's time to look at what I'm doing, because I should not be feeling this way about something I'm this passionate about.
Yeah, and especially like I will challenge everyone to stop thinking like you look at Stephen Bartlett's podcast and you go, "Oh my gosh, how come my podcast isn't this or that?" Like stop trying to do what a team of 50 does when you're a
Mm.
team of 1,
Be the
right?
first you. Just be the first you. That's all you can control. Maybe someday you get to that point where you've got a team of 50 doing your production for you. But for now, we'll go back to what we said before. Be thankful you live in a world where that's reality, because a lot of people don't have that. And many people, nobody had it how many years ago? So,
Agree.
well,
Agree.
well, Anna, we did it. We said, are we going to be able to go an hour? I was completely confident that we could probably go another hour at a minimum. So we're going to have you back for a sequel at some point.
Oh, I will be ready. If anyone ever flays on you, I'm here. If you want to have me to talk about anything else, I am here.
Well,
Anytime. Thank you.
we will absolutely make that happen. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me here on Let's Blow This Up. And please take a moment to let the Bomb Squad know how they can connect with you for even more.
Yes. So, of course, there are 77 episodes that you can catch on the podcast space. Any platform that you want to listen or watch on YouTube. But to connect with me on social, the best is Instagram at the podcast space. And I'm sure on this link, you can find all the links about me. And if you're on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and Xavier. And that's it. Connect with me. I will talk to you. I want to know. I want to know and talk to everybody.
I highly recommend connecting with Anna. She's a lot of fun to engage with on social media. She puts out great content. So I'll make it easy and put the links in the show notes so you can easily connect. Highly recommend you do that. And in case you didn't know, we are here every Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube with fresh episodes of Let's Blow This Up. Podcast versions go live every Friday. Make sure you are subscribed, you're following, you're clicking the bell on YouTube so you get a notification when we go live, not just with Let's Blow This Up, but with Podcast Theory. Please don't be a dick about this. Until our paths cross again next week, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Let's Blow This Up. My name is Jason Sircone. For Anna Xavier, this has been a great time. I hope you enjoyed it. Until we meet again, stay explosive. We'll see you next week.